Korean second baseman Hye-Seong Kim should be making his decision before Friday, and it's rumored that the Mariners are one of the three teams that have made an offer to him. And it turns out that offer is likely lower than we originally thought. Joe and I are going to talk about that, what it would mean if the Mariners were to sign Hye-Seong Kim, which kind of seems likely at this point, by the way, and what that means for the rest of the offseason, including the positions around the diamond. We're going to wrap it all up by talking about Felix Hernandez and his Hall of Fame ballot. It's the first year for him on the ballot, and it sounds like he will be staying on there. Thank you guys so much for watching episode 153 of the Hit It Here podcast, part of the Bleav Network. This is the Gage host episode of the podcast. First podcast of 2025, by the way. First episode we are putting out. Joe, Happy New Year. How are you?
Happy New Year, Colty. Happy to have you back. I know we had a fill-in last episode for the final episode of 2024. Less about me. How are you feeling going into 2025, having missed out on the celebration kind of episode of 2024?
I'm just saying he was a bit disruptive.
What do you mean?
I respect when you talk, you know what I mean? Like I listen. You know, he wasn't listening. He didn't care.
But he knew even though he wasn't listening, he was such an active participant in the conversation afterwards. Like it was like he knew exactly what I said. That's true. Like he knew how to feed off of that. You know what I mean? Yeah. It was a very organic conversation, I feel like. He didn't necessarily need to pay as much attention. Like he hit all the story beats that we needed to. You know, that's just what he does. He's talented, man. He's talented.
This is a weird way of you telling everyone that like you're schizophrenic.
Is it?
And you talk to yourself a lot. Yeah. Is this a cry for help?
It could.
Is that what this was?
I really like the movie Split with James McAvoy. So this could be a cry for help. And the rumors of me having a the doomer personality, like that's the third character I'll be playing on this channel. Like it's whoa. Eventually I'll assume the personality of ladder guy. Things are gonna get crazy, man. Things are gonna get crazy, but things are good. 2025. It seems like we're starting off on the right foot. If Kim's looking to sign by Friday, the Mariners, they seem like they're in a not like the pole position to sign him necessarily, but like they're in the final three maybe. It's hard to tell exactly like how many teams are remaining in this like sweepstakes for him, but the most recent kind of like bit of information that we got is that the contract that we expected of like maybe not expected, what I had originally given Hye-Seong Kim in my like offseason plans was 4 years, 24 million roughly. So like around 6 million a year annual average. That's just kind of what I did. It's looking now like closer to a shorter deal, so he'll hit free agency again quicker, but also the money's not as lucrative as we all kind of expected. It's 3 years, 15 million as like the highest mark, which for $5 million, getting a guy that could be just Josh Rojas again, it's like you tendered Josh Rojas, it seems like, but with a younger version of him with more potential. Obviously, Rojas is going into his age 31 season. The bat didn't really play super well last year. The glove was amazing. He wasn't necessarily like a bad base runner. Stole a decent amount of bags. Like, did his job for the most part. It's just like the bat wasn't there. If you're signing Hye-Seong Kim to be, pretty much an everyday second baseman, he's a strong side platoon. So the lefties that you face, he won't play in every single game, but like you saw the impact Luke Raley made when not seeing like more than 80 at bats against lefties last year. That's probably even too high. Like you saw his impact he was able to make against right-handed pitching. Obviously, not going to project that kind of offensive production from Kim like that, but still, it's a guy that in a strong side platoon should see the bulk of the playing time. And if that's what he's interested in a team that is in their contention window still, he'll factor into being a bigger part of that than with other teams that are probably looking at him. I think it's not an unreasonable conclusion to make that the Mariners could and should have a really good shot at signing Kim by Friday.
I think that what you mentioned there with the platoon is very interesting. And we'll talk a little bit more about like what those platoon splits would mean at second base here in just a second. But going back to the contract, it seems like a very Mariners friendly contract in terms of it's cheap. He has great potential. He's a career 304, 364, 403 hitter. in Korea, doesn't strike out a whole bunch, deals roughly 30-ish bags a year. Doesn't strike out like hardly ever. Not a lot of power in his bat. Left-handed bat. Like, I think it makes sense. And Jage mentioned over on Twitter, make sure you guys go follow Jage. He mentioned on Twitter that there are reportedly 3 deals, all at 3 years, 50 million or less. The Mariners have been reported as one of the teams to offer, but also reported as not being the highest bidder. So in terms of what that means, maybe the Mariners are offering a 3-year, $12 million deal. So it's like $4 million a year or something like that instead of 5. Like, yeah, like you said, it's the Josh Rojas contract, but he's 5 years younger. But we also don't know, like, is his bat gonna? I mean, Josh Rojas' bat wasn't good, but like, do we know if Kim's is gonna be any better? I don't know. I think that in terms of the options that Hye-Seong Kim has when it comes to contending and comes to basically playing almost every day, the Mariners are the best fit, in my opinion, for him. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of speculation over the next couple of days because, I mean, if he's not signed until Friday, we have what, 2 days, I guess, until we figure it out. Yeah. I guess it's not that far. But when it comes to what he could do for you in 2025, you could platoon him at second base. Let's say, worst case scenario, he's the only player the Mariners signed this offseason. First of all, I bashed my head against the wall. Or like the only acquisition they make, right? You could platoon him at second base with Ryan Bliss and have Dylan Moore start at third. Like, that's probably what you do in that scenario. I don't like it, but I think that is the thing that makes sense. You could platoon him with either Ryan Bliss or Dylan Moore, probably anywhere, if you do feel like he needs to be a platoon. Obviously, we don't know for sure because we need to see if he can hit here at all first, whether or not he can be a platoon. But I would just be interested to see what that contract would look like if he was to sign with the Mariners and what their plans for it would be.
I think the not like a wild card that's being that would be thrown into here is, but like Austin Shenton, I think if it's Kim and Bliss at second, it's Moore and Shenton at third would be my best guess of how those platoons would kind of work. And of course, Dylan Moore, Ryan Bliss, they're both right-handed, so like they're a weak side platoon, but I think that they would see like Moore or Bliss would, I think, probably see more playing time over Shenton would be my guess, even against right-handed bats, just to see what they've got going for them. Obviously, like in bigger matchups, like if there's something that Dylan Moore struggles with, if it's like velocity over 97 miles an hour, you're saying it's a lot of things. If it's Ryan Bliss against like sliders and like who you're facing is a wicked, it's got a wicked curveball, man, you know, there's whatever. Like, there's going to be situational matchups that make a lot of sense to play Shenton, Bliss, or Moore in any of them. How does Kim factor into that? I just think it gives you more depth. It raises the floor of the team that currently exists. Would it raise the floor if they just brought back Rojas and didn't sign Kim? Like, I'd say it's probably pretty equivalent. Like, what you're getting out of Kim is great defense, great speed, and a question mark bat. What you got out of Rojas last year is great defense, not as good speed, and a bat that was only good for a singular month of the season. Like, I think signing Kim and having him be like a utility guy for, if he doesn't pan out as like an everyday player, a utility guy that can just kind of be like the Swiss Army knife type player where like you could have him pinch run, you can have him do a spot start, you can have him pinch hit late in a game. Like, there's going to be utility out of him regardless, just because the Mariners have shown their ability to get the most out of certain guys like that in spurts. Think of like, I mean, people fell in love with Sam Haggerty. Obviously, Dylan Moore was the first one of this, like, you know, post 2020. Because like you think back previously, I mean, if you want to count like Taylor Motter, if you want to count Chris Taylor, certain ones that failed, but now you've seen some success that the Mariners have had with them. Like, I think Kim can be that option, especially with Dylan Moore's this being his last year of his contract, how that kind of plays out. Like, this could be the Dylan Moore replacement of like a guy on your bench that can fill in a couple spots and give you decent production. You're not going to get 4 wins out of Kim, I don't think. I think that's like his ceiling.
What did Dylan Moore have last year?
Like 2.5. So like
defense.
That's just not true, man. Like it's legitimately just not true. Like you're just lying for no reason. He had a 105 WRC plus. He's better than Ichiro, man. Listen.
It's true.
It's true, and you can't argue it. I think Kim is a fine signing, and I think having him be part of the roster is great. I think that it adds a lot of flexibility. It's something that we missed at second base last year with great defense because Polanco was hard to watch. Yeah, the bat probably better, but I mean, it wasn't all that much better than like Josh Rojas was the entire year. Like, I think Polanco had a 92 WRC plus, Rojas had a 91. Like,
Ugh.
if you can just get like a 90, like it's literally like the Jose Caballero player. Like, yeah, his bat wasn't great, but he played great defense and he stole bases. And he was one of the more valuable Mariners in 2023 because of that. Like, yes, it's not a sexy play style that you're gonna sit there and watch. I know, and that's just the Mariners, man. Like, people are like, oh, it's so boring to watch a pitching duel and the speedster second baseman get hit by a pitch and then steal second and third and be the only run scored of the game. A win is a win if they win that game, right? Like that moment of where he steals second, he steals third after getting hit by a pitch could be the game changing moment. Having someone that has that ability, like in their locker, in their backpack, to just do that, that's awesome. You have a couple of them, I think. Like Rayleigh can do that. Robles can do that. Like, obviously Julio can do that. But like, those are the more like impact guys versus like your utility players that you're going to deploy. I don't know if it's like a bad thing that it's going to take at bats away from Dylan Moore, Ryan Bliss, or Austin Shenton. Like, would they have given you more production as opposed to a guy like Kim in those spots? There's nothing guaranteed there. So I think you adding him just like helps out raising the floor. It's just a matter of if they do anything after that. The fact that it's gonna be less than $5 million a year, and if they maybe backload it, it might be like 2.5, 3 million this year. That leaves you still 10 plus to go out there and make another move as it stands right now without trading Luis Castillo. Like, I think there's still the way that this contract has kind of come to fruition and like been unveiled to us. I think it's a blessing in the sense that like they'll still have potentially like 10 to 12 million to go out and sign someone that might be a more impact bat, less of an impact on the side of the ball that Kim will have in speed and defense. Like there's going to be options, I think, beyond Kim.
I think the hard part is like we're making a big deal about a contract that in the end is very small. Like, how often do we look back at Dylan Moore's like extension, like, oh, that's really hindering the Mariners? We don't, because it's not. He's well worth it. He's well worth the extension that he got. I mean, Kim, it wouldn't be very hard for him to live up to this contract. Hell, the Mariners were paying Evan White a lot more than this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can almost guarantee, well, I don't want to say that. I would be shocked if Hye-Seong Kim is not better than Evan White was, at least as an all-around player. Obviously, no one will ever be as good as Evan White at first base. But I think the hard part with signing Hye-Seong Kim here is, you talked a little bit about it, him like platooning at second and then Shenton and Moore at third. The other problem is you have another platoon over at first base with Rayleigh and Locklear, and you just don't have the bench spots to accommodate that when you are carrying guys like Mitch Garver and Mitch Haniger as well. And so it makes it hard where you need at least one of those positions needs to be an everyday guy, like someone who's in there no matter what. And I don't know if Hye-Seong Kim can be that guy, which sucks, but that's kind of where I'm at. Now, you're not going to really lose any sleep if you have to DFA Austin Shenton. No. Like,
unless you're Colby Patino, but that's not the point here,
right? But that's just because Austin Shenton's a cool dude. Yeah, I don't know. I think that it's interesting. It's a good way. It's a good start to an offseason that should have started months ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see it happen at this point. Like where there's smoke, there's fire, and it does seem like there's a lot of smoke about him coming to the Mariners. But just do it. Just get it done so we can finally move on. That's honestly how I felt about the Castillo trades lately. I'm like, can we just do it so we don't have to talk about it anymore? Because when there's literally nothing to talk about, you really cling to those 2 or 3 things that are giving you little morsels of food.
Yeah, just the little nuggets of information that give you a glimmer of hope.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like
exactly what we've done.
We're holding on to a guy that could be below league average bat. And like adding that to an offense that needed a lot of help in 2024. Yes, they have done that, like with Randy Rosarena and with Victor Robles going into 2025. Like, if you looked at the scope of the team for the majority of 2024, like you wouldn't have, like you were still probably looking at like, okay, how does Dom Canzone get at bats in the outfield in 2025? Like, I don't really care whether or not he sees a single major league at bat in 2025. personally with the Mariners. Like unless he comes out there and shows up, that's awesome. But like until then, like what's he gonna do for me? Like hit a pinch hit home run? I hope so. That'd be sick. But like I don't know. Is his roster spot more valuable than Mitch Haniger's? Probably, just based on like money and principle alone. But like the way that they need to augment the roster offensively to be more competitive by not playing that boring-ish brand of baseball that I mentioned. Kim is a fine start, but it can't be the only thing. And the way that, I mean, you're saying it, like the off season's what, like a month and a half gone. We've only got like a month and a half left essentially until pitchers and catchers probably report. Like you're running, it's not like you're running out of time fully, but like the clock is ticking. Like something has got to give eventually. And I think the international free agent pool, like that's definitely like an interesting like pocket of players to kind of like fall into, because you're waiting, or there's like a deadline for them, right? Like obviously Kim's is Friday, Sasaki, like that decision's supposed to be being made in about 2 weeks, or like, you know, the finalization of that kind of decision, maybe not fully announced, but like they picked the 2 guys this offseason that you literally have to wait around and see if they're going to pick you or not. And that's who the Mariners said, like, yep, these are our guys. Have fun with it. Have fun just sitting on your hands, everybody else, because like that's what we chose to do. And I mean, if they get both of them, awesome. Sasaki and Kim, that's a fine offseason by me. It allows you to have a bit of flexibility. I think they still need a little bit more offensively, obviously. But again, you probably still have a little bit of money in there to make a move like that. It's just, we're sitting here waiting. And it's like, when will something happen? Once those guys are gone, we'll know.
Let me ask you one more thing before we move on here. If the Mariners were to sign Hye-Seong Kim and Hye-Seong Kim, would you be okay with that? Like in terms of where the offseason's at, would you feel good going into 2025 with Hye-Seong Kim at second, maybe platooning with like Dylan Moore, and Hye-Seong Kim at third, and then running it out there with Rayleigh and Locklear at first? Would you like, how would you feel if that was the offseason?
I wouldn't be upset. I know Hye-Seong Kim, he's not going to play until what, like maybe like middle of May, June, potentially.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Somewhere around there. So your third base to start would probably be like what we've already said of Dylan Moore and Austin Shenton, and then you kind of see where it goes from there after that once Kim is back. I would be okay with that. I mean, Kim is a great player. Hye-Seong Kim's a great player. Had a phenomenal season with the Padres. Had 2 of them, like really great seasons. I think provides you great defense flexibility as well. Like he's versatile. He can play shortstop. He probably should play shortstop over JP defensively, at least, maybe. It's just there's not a lot of pop. And if the Mariners don't think that they need that pop, that's fine. If they're going to create runs other ways by singles, just moving the line, having people run bases well, that's great. It's not going to be super exciting. I think it can work. I don't know why Hye-Seong Kim would do that, though, in the sense of if he's only going to sign a 1-year contract. Not saying that you're saying that he will, but in my head he does, because he's injured for this year. And so it's going to be like on a prove it, like, hey, like this is what I did in 90 games. You want to see it for 162 in 2026? All right, then pony up. He's not going to do that in Seattle, I don't think. And that's something that you've said a ton this offseason of like, why Hye-Seong Kim I keep saying Kim, but we're talking about 2 things that are both Kims, and it's pissing me off. Hye-Seong Kim. Why would he do that to Seattle? Like, no one's ever going to sign a prove it deal and it be with the Seattle Mariners if you're a position player. I'd be okay with that move at the end of the day. I would just be surprised if Hye-Seong Kim did make that decision. I think you'd be okay with it too. You've talked a lot about liking Hye-Seong Kim. I think you're in that same vein of knowing that there's probably there are better avenues to go offensively, but if they're trying to change maybe like the brand of baseball of like not striking out a ton, not just like bailing it all out for power, like tapping into what Edgar does best as far as like contact first, hit the balls into the gap, like double machine kind of guy, like I could see it working out better than we could really like think about right now. Obviously we can't see it because the season hasn't started. Like, you'll only know how good the offense is going to be until they're actually playing the games.
I think that if the Mariners did want to go like the 2015 Royals route and have, just a bunch of slappy guys, fast guys, with a few boppers in the middle of that lineup, obviously like Moustakas and Hosmer and Salvi were there at that time, I'm pretty sure. And, for the Mariners, that'd be your, Cal and Julio and Randy, but a bunch of role players that maybe aren't the sexy picks, like you said earlier, but our guys are going to move the game along. And whether that be playing small ball, dropping on a bunt like Luke Raley does so well, like maybe that's the plan. I don't know. But I think that if that was the case, if they did sign both of the Kims, I would definitely still want there to be another move made because I don't think I can trust Hye-Seong Kim as like a bona fide guy, like an everyday second baseman. But I can understand why the Mariners might decide to go that route. A, because they can afford it. B, they made some moves. That's what I could see them doing. Let's switch gears now, Joe, to my favorite player of all time, and that is Felix Hernandez, who obviously is in the first year of eligibility on the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame ballot. And there's been a lot of talk about whether or not Felix is going to make it to the Hall of Fame, or is he going to fall off the ballot altogether? Because you have to have over, 5% of the vote to stay on the ballot. The good news is Felix is well above that. He will be staying on the ballot for at least another year. So much so, in fact, that as of right now this will change, but as of when we're recording this, he's at 30.5%.
Mm-hmm.
Now you need 75% to get voted in? I believe it is
70 or 75.
You might right. It might be 70. Regardless, he won't be voted in this year.
Yeah. No.
But the fact that he's already at 30%, at least right now, obviously we'll have to wait. I think I said was it January 21st was the announcement day. So we'll have to see where
it's 75%. 75.
So we'll have to see on the 21st where his percentage finishes up. Mm-hmm. But when you think back to Edgar, who got in his very last year of eligibility because of a massive push from Mariners fans and, Edgar fans around the world, he was able to get in. And obviously, he was a DH. Like they're a little bit different. Felix's prime is one of the best we've ever seen, up there with guys like, in my opinion, like Pedro Martinez, in terms of his prime being some of the best right-handed pitching we've seen, albeit shorter than we saw with Pedro, of course.
Yeah.
But I do think that Felix deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame. Maybe I'm biased, but you cannot ignore his peak. And I think that eventually he will get in.
There's been like a tonal shift as far as how the Hall of Fame voting has kind of been conducted. And I think it's one for the positive because voters are realizing like the counting stats, the team stats aren't as important, or they're just not going to be, they're not as important to the modern game, right? You're not going to see another 300 game winner ever. I don't think anybody will. Like no one that is alive right now will ever see another 300 game winner in Major League Baseball, unless Manfred's like idea of wanting to have like starters, throw a minimum of 6 innings every single game or whatever. Like there's not going to be the decisions that pitchers get has just frankly gone down year by year. It seems like was there a 20 game winner this year? I think there was a 19 game winner, but I don't know if there was 20.
Yeah, I don't know.
I could be wrong. But it's just the way that the game has changed should help Felix long term. And I know we're not talking about the other Mariner on the ballot, Ichiro. He's first ballot. If he's not unanimous, I'd be surprised. Griffey wasn't unanimous.
Yeah, if Griffey wasn't unanimous, I mean, don't get me wrong, Ichiro is the all-time hit king.
But I think, again, with the way that the tone is shifted, I think there's a possibility that Ichiro is unanimous. But again, that's not necessarily the conversation at hand. We're talking about Felix. Yeah, I mean, his peak, his prime from 2009 to 2015, he was in the Cy Young conversation every single year other than 2011. But he was an all-star that year. He did win a Cy Young. He finished second twice along with that as well. Like finished in the top 10 in MVP once. Like should have 2 Cy Youngs to a lot of people. Corey Kluber, looking at you, buddy. Like dude was a workhorse, plain and simple. The thing that I think will hurt Felix's case, and I see a lot, maybe not a lot of people, but it might be foolish who's talked about it, but like comparing him to like all-time greats, like Sandy Koufax, right? Koufax did not have a good start to his career, and then his peak, his prime, like to finish off his career, is like the best pitching peak prime we've ever seen ever, or the game has ever seen. Obviously, we haven't seen it, but like it was unbelievable. You look at his career WAR. Felix has more career WAR than Sandy Koufax. He's got less Cy Youngs. He's got less ERA titles. He doesn't have a World Series. Like, there's going to be accolade issues as far as getting Felix in, I think. It's not even necessarily like counting stats like wins, strikeouts, whatever anymore. It's accolades. 6-time All-Star, 1-time Cy Young, 2-time ERA title. That doesn't scream Hall of Famer, at least for what we've seen so far. But I think with the way that the voting is shifting a little bit to recognize that all of that was in a 7-year peak, that is what people I think are starting to recognize as far as like, yeah, this guy, had he not had to come up at the age of 19 and be thrown 200, like just the way that the game and the arm deterioration has, I mean, how it affected Felix long term and how, the injury riddled aspects of his career and the latter half where he just was basically thrown out there to pitch even when he was probably injured. We watched it multiple times. Like you saw the velo drop tremendously later in his career. And it just, the changeup wasn't dancing as much. Like there was times where we all knew Felix was hurt, but he was still out there on the mound. I'm hoping that he gets in. I'm not as optimistic as you are, I don't think. Just based around how I kind of view the Hall of Fame voting process. I think it's going to have to continue to change year in, like from here on out until he's either voted in or off the ballot. I could see it maybe being a final year and people really starting to push for it, similar to Edgar, but it's going to take more shifting of the way voters have been voting, I think, for him to get in.
Yeah, going back to the Edgar thing a little bit, I pulled up his yearly totals in terms of percentages. His first year on the ballot was 2010. He received 36.2%. 2011, 32.9, so it went down. 36.5 in 2012, 35.9 in 2013, and then in 2014 and 2015, he was at 25.2% and 27%. And then was up to 58.6% in 2017, and then obviously I believe was inducted the next year. So technically he was technically inducted in 2019, but the voting was from the year before. Anyway, there was a big push, like you said, but when you look at his percentage numbers, like if Felix can hover, around like the mid 20s, obviously Edgar should have been probably first ballot, in my opinion. If David Ortiz was first ballot, again, Edgar Martinez should have been.
You have to look, but like you have to look at accolades. Ortiz is a 3-time World Series champion, maybe just 2-time.
That's a team award.
Yeah, but like people value that. They do value.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But like I think the hard part you agree with this, but just for anyone else, like you can't value Felix Hernandez based on the team he played for, because the team he played for was terrible.
Sure.
The Seattle Mariners suck. They suck now, but they really sucked back then during his time, and his prime was wasted on the 2010 team and whatnot. He's the owner of one of 24 perfect games in MLB history.
He's a part of a pretty illustrious list there. You're not wrong.
I believe he is like top 3 like international pitchers in terms of strikeouts. I might be wrong on that, but yeah, he is a guy that his peak is undeniable, and his career was just cut short because of injuries. That's simply all there is to it. And up until I think it was 2015 when he first got injured, I believe it was his ankle or his calf or something that year, it really derailed after that. And it was just every single time there was something else wrong with him, and he was never the same pitcher after that. So I mean, it sucks. It happens. Like stuff like that happens. I think that as we get, there will be a similar conversation coming up in a few years with guys like Steven Strasburg. Like fantastic peak, could not stay on the field.
Yeah.
Like I look at guys throughout history that guys were having, 20 plus year careers. That's not so much of a thing anymore. And Felix, ahead of his time, in which he was throwing as hard as he did at the time, he he kind of stood alone as someone who threw as many innings as he did in such a short amount of time. It just because like he basically, because of how good he was and because of how much of a workhorse he was, he may not make the Hall of Fame because of it. And I
Mhm.
think that is something that the baseball writers really need to take a look at, because I think that, I don't know, in my opinion, he'll get in, maybe not for another decade, but he will get in at some point.
I think he's got a better chance of getting in than Strasburg does not
Mhm.
staying on after the first year. I don't think Strasburg gets enough
Same.
personally, right? Just like going off of a name that you mentioned. But yeah, I like his Hall of Fame case and the way that they'll have to look at the upcoming names of like who's really out there that's going to be worthy of being inducted in the Hall of Fame. There's plenty of names in the bigs right now. Obviously, Kershaw, Verlander, Scherzer, Greinke. I think we're all guys that have better chances than Felix getting in. Personally, Greinke's probably the only one that'd be like, it's probably about the same. But I think in reality, I'd say they're probably pretty similar cases. Greinke may be a little bit better. But I the Hall of Fame thing is just weird, man, because there's guys that should be in that aren't, or there's guys that got voted in that should not be in there, kind of a thing. So I don't know. I'm just excited and hopeful that since the game has changed so much, that the writers, like you're saying, they need to recognize that. I'm hoping that the writers and the people that do get to vote are cognizant of that, because it will completely change, I think, the landscape of what the Hall of Fame is for baseball. I don't want it to be like the NFL. I don't want it to be like the NBA, where like anyone and their mother can get in. You had a triple double once, okay, you're in the NBA Hall of Fame. You made one All Pro team because you're like you're the only wide receiver to get targeted that single year. All right, you're in the Hall of Fame. I think those two leagues specifically have very poor Hall of Fames. Maybe baseball has too prestigious of one, and maybe that's what people want. Maybe it should be that prestigious, but get Felix in, man.
It's all that matters.
That's all I
Get
gotta
Felix in.
say.
I don't care anymore. Get him in. We've talked about it enough, and that's going to do it from us on episode 153 of the Hit It Here podcast, the touching bases episode of the podcast. And go Mariners.